Welcome to Looking at Lucasfilm, the podcast with a different perspective on the world of Star Wars, Indiana Jones, and all of the other entities that George Lucas, Kathleen Kennedy, and the rest of the team at Lucasfilm have dreamed up over the past 40 years. I'm entertainment writer Jim Hill, and my co-host, the one, the only, Dan Z, and I are recording this on Wednesday, April 1st. So, how long at this point have you been working from home, Dan?
Well, this is midway through the third week. Though last week, to be fair, was our spring break. But yeah, we've been doing remote or distance learning for 2 of the 3 last weeks, for sure.
Okay. And I have to ask it, have you and your students, or for that matter, you and your family, settled into routine yet? Or
We've been quite vigilant about that because we know how important that is psychologically, especially for the kids. So we try to get up at our normal-ish times. We have like certain schedules that our 6-year-old follows. Every half hour he has something different that he does. Deanna, my wife, and I have to work from home from 9 o'clock to 2:30 every single day, and that involves meetings. That involves conferencing with students, electronically, grading papers, creating assignments, and even trying to figure out electronic ways to do lecturing. So it's really interesting. I mean, it's certainly quite different from anything I have done as an educator, but I also kind of like that challenge in still finding ways to engage students, even though I'm not in the same classroom or in the same room with them.
Okay. Well, I mean, and again, I love your attitude, and seeing this as a challenge rather than a burden,
Yes.
But let's be honest, though, that this pandemic, has had some pretty significant impact. In fact, just this week or in the last couple of days, it impacted the Star Wars community. And I don't know if you've seen the story yet, Dan, about Andrew Jack.
Yes, I had.
Okay, so
Very sad.
Can you explain to folks who Andrew, for that matter, I guess the character that he played in episode 8, The Last Jedi, the General Kowloon Emat, if I got the name right? Or
Right, and he's also in The Force Awakens as well. I feel like JJ uses him in a lot of stuff, but he was he's one of the heads of the Resistance. And I know he's on the recon unit. He's the one in The Last Jedi at the end of the Battle of Crate that walks up and kind of steps out of the trench to kind of look around and use his micro binoculars to stare out into the distance and catch the First Order as they're getting ready to invade the old Rebel base. He's kind of known for that striking, long, nice, beautiful gray hair and the beard, and it seemed to be. He's also a dialect coach too. By all accounts, a great guy.
Yeah, but here's the thing, folks. We lost Jack yesterday, Tuesday, March 31st. He passed away in a hospital in Surrey as a result of coronavirus. He was 76, and quick message to the Star Wars fans, especially the younger ones. And I say this is a 61-year-old man, supposedly somebody who's a prime target for this pandemic. I have a pre-existing condition of diabetes, but look, I've been practicing social distancing to 2003. That's when I basically began working from home doing this internet podcasting thing. So, I'm probably going to be okay. But whereas somebody like Andrew Jack, I mean, this is a guy who reportedly lived on one of the oldest working houseboats on the Thames, all right, which sounds on the face of it pretty isolated, but he still somehow managed to catch the coronavirus. And this is the thing, he was originally diagnosed, Dan, with COVID-19 on Sunday, the 29th, and by the 31st he was gone. And
it's unbelievable. It's just kind of a stunner, really.
Absolutely. So folks, it's, again, not to be downbeat, but this really isn't a time to be playing around. You need to take this stuff seriously, practice social distancing. Better yet, just stay home, where you can then do things like listen to Coffee with Kenobi.
You go. Or the Jim Hill Media Network.
I said productive ways to spend your time, Dan. not that crud. On the other hand, you could also watch Star Wars Episode 9, The Rise of Skywalker. That J.J. Abrams film just became available on Blu-ray and DVD yesterday. Okay, so you're not supposed to leave the house unless you're running an essential errand like grocery shopping, but maybe you're like me. Maybe you do the bulk of your grocery shopping at Target. I guess you could pick up the Target exclusive version of Skywalker, which is supposed to be a 4-disc set and come with a gallery book. Again, I know you have an association from your very cool commercial, Dan, with Target. But I'm a flinty New Englander. When I see something that's $34.99, my sales resistance kicks in. I have to ask if any of our listeners actually got this, which I guess comes with the 4K ultra high definition version of the concluding capture of the Skywalker saga. I'm just wondering if somebody could tell us whether or not that disc and the gallery book was worth the extra fee.
I'd like to know that as well. And I, for some reason, in the back of my mind, I'm thinking that gallery book is excerpts from the Art of the Rise of Skywalker book, but I can't officially confirm that. But I thought that was what they had said in an original press release. I'm not sure. I would love to know if it's worth that extra price as well. And if this one, the Target one, has an extra bonus feature that the others don't have.
Yeah. Now speaking of what you just mentioned, the Art of Star Wars Rise of Skywalker, which also finally went on sale after a considerable delay on Tuesday, March 31st. And this was written by Phil Szostak, who handled the tech side of Art of Star Wars: The Force Awakens, Art of Star Wars: The Last Jedi, and the Art of Solo, a Star Wars story. Now, let's see, as I understand, now you've been sent sort of an advanced copy of it. Have you paged through it, Dan? Or?
I have, and it is gorgeous. I mean, the art is, of course, it's absolutely stunning. There's some wonderful behind the scenes stuff, some discussions about the evolution of the characters, how they almost took Kylo Ren's helmet or mask from The Rise of Skywalker and made it look not necessarily like Vader, but certainly influenced by Vader, especially some of the things on the sides. And there's a great StarWars.com post about that came up recently as well. But you're going to love it. You're going to be riveted. I'm not going to say it's as good as The Art of Onward, because that is written by the beloved, family-friendly Drew Taylor. But it is really, really good.
Okay, well, as long as we're inserting plugs for family members, I guess I should note that if you're to order the Art of Star Wars: The Rise of Skywalker, which, by the way, Amazon has on sale right now, 30% off. That you may need to put a little extra money in the kitty to get free shipping. So why not pre-order your copy of the Star Wars book? Expand your knowledge of a galaxy far, far away, which also just by accident happens to be written by Dan Z, along with Pablo Hidalgo and Cole Horton.
That's right. I think that's a wonderful idea. I like it. You're a giving man. I love it.
What can I tell you? That on the other hand, all right, I can be supportive of that, but I have been watching season 7 of Star Wars Clone Wars, and what do you think of this story arc that's going on right now? The one that started with what was it? Gone with a Trace?
Yes, with the Martez sisters.
Yeah.
I think I understand that it's kind of received a mixed reception, and this is the first show or series of shows in the Clone Wars that actually features Ahsoka after leaving at the end of season 5. Of course, we've seen her in Rebels and heard her in The Rise of Skywalker, but not actually seen her in the world of Clone Wars until this arc. And at first, I wasn't crazy about it. But then I heard Dave Filoni say on Clone Wars Download, which is featured every week on StarWars.com, that Ahsoka is sort of the midway point between these two, whereas Trace is the young, optimistic, naive Ahsoka. The Rafa, the older sister, is much more cynical, jaded, and certainly much more of a seedy character. That could be where Ahsoka could go if she lets herself become embittered by the Jedi. So when I think of it that way, as these two are foils for Ahsoka, and Ahsoka is the fulcrum between the two, which is great because that's her code name in season 1 of Star Wars Rebels, then it works really, really well. And I actually liked Deal No Deal quite a bit.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And we've got another episode. What is it? Dangerous Debt.
Yes.
Coming. Now that this caps off this story thread, or
I don't think so. I think it's part 3 of 4, because I know Siege of Mandalore is going to be a 4-parter, and that's going to end the whole series.
Okay. All right. Well, okay. All right. I'll trust your take on this because, again, just like it's one of those things. You're watching something, and you at this point, I want to reach through the screen and strangle Rafa, and that's.
She's a very frustrating character and does not think of her sister's best interest. That's for sure.
Okay. Now we were just talking about Ahsoka Tano, and as part of this podcast, have we talked about the Rosario Dawson news about how she's been cast as the?
You know what? I think that came out after we recorded last week.
Okay, and I know now you are a huge fan of Ashley Eckstein, the very talented voice actor who's, how long has she been doing this character? And
gosh, ever since Clone Wars was a film, which was I think back in 2006, probably 2006, 2007.
And I know you and I have talked, previously about this, issue in kind of vague terms, to the effect of, I think, you're obviously in Ashley's corner, but at the same time, have to respect the choices that, what Filoni and crew have made.
Yeah, I don't even know if I want to say I'm torn. I just think it's unfortunate to a degree because I feel like Ashley was an actress before she took on Ahsoka, and she's acted in other things since then, and she's such a face of the brand. I would have liked to have seen her get a crack at this, and I have no idea about the inner workings or what happened. Mm-hmm. I also know that I trust Dave, and if he believes Rosario Dawson is the choice, then okay, I'll take a wait and see approach or attitude. But I would be lying if I didn't say that. To me, Ahsoka and Ashley are sort of interchangeable.
No,
they're just that's her. I mean, she's I can't think of a better representative of the brand.
Okay. No, I get that. Now, did you see the piece of concept art that dropped a day or so ago of supposedly the version of Ahsoka we're going to get to see as part of Mandalorian season 2?
No, I didn't.
Yeah, you have to chase this down because the thing is that it's got Ahsoka riding on the back of what looks to be, what was the giant wolf creature from Star Wars Rebels?
Oh, the Loth Wolves. Yeah.
It looks to be a Loth wolf, but the interesting thing is, seated alongside her appears to be Captain Rex.
You're kidding. Is this official or is this like rumor stuff?
This is the interesting thing. It was released in the, and what's fascinating is that it was put out there along with, I'm sure you've heard that Michael Mann from the original Terminator film has also been cast in a role for season 2.
Mm-hmm.
But it has his character's costume design. So
wow.
It's one of these things where it's like, it suddenly went from, okay, this is intriguing to intriguing. So, and by the way, I also want to stress here that there's been a lot of concern because, face it, since the middle of last month when Governor Newsom of California put out that order that they're from, I want to say from March 12th. That no unessential gatherings of 250 people or more were allowed in the state of California. And obviously, Dan, you've been on film sets. There are more than 250 people typically in a film set.
Yeah.
So, there's a lot of stuff that got shut down. But the interesting thing is the Mandalorian literally shot, completed shooting on March 9th. So they through just sheer luck, they missed that that shutdown order. Now, mind you, Disney's had to ramp down production of that little that reimagining of the Little Mermaid that they do with live action that they're doing with in London, and likewise Josh Gad's sort of extension of the original Honey I Shrunk franchise Shrunk.
Your buddy Josh Gad.
My buddy Josh Gad, yes. But Mandalorian made it under the wire, and I've been calling friends to check out, and it turns out effects work is proceeding, but it's effects work where literally folks are at home on their laptops working on shots for the production. So it looks like long story short, looks like the show's going to actually make its October delivery date for Disney Springs. But speaking of delivery dates, people are trapped in their homes and going to the mailbox every day now. Dan, looking for that child, that baby Yoda, that they ordered, and I hate to break hearts here, but was talking with a friend at Disney Parks Products and Experiences, or is it Disney Parks Experience and Products? I forget which order the words are in. But basically, because of everything that's been going on in China, which is where a lot of the factories were working on the child Baby Yoda stuff, and also what's going on with the ports right now with so few people being able to staff, it's far more likely that these toys that were supposed to show up in April aren't going to make it till May. If you have a son and daughter who keeps going out to the mailbox looking for that box from Amazon, you might want to them for a while. Speaking of May, it was 10 years ago this May that Star Wars fans learned that a reimagining of Star Tours at Disneyland Park and Disney's Hollywood Studios was in the works. This attraction would close for a year, but when it reopened in 2011, Star Tours, now with a sort of subtitle, The Adventure Continues, would be an immersive 3D experience that would then take guests to different but still familiar parts of the Star Wars galaxy. Now, the reason I bring this up, Dan, is that to prepare for the attraction's grand imaginings, Star Tours was supposed to close at Disneyland Park on July 27th of that year. And then, but with the Disney's Hollywood Studios version closing on September 8th of 2010. But in order to make sure the most dedicated of Star Wars fans actually got the chance to say goodbye to this attraction, during Star Wars Celebration 5 in Orlando, they had on August 14th a last tour to Endor party. And I was wondering, Dan, did you make it to that event? Or
No, I wish. That was kind of right before Coffee with Kenobi started, and we wasn't able to make it, although I watched it feverishly. And I remember they did a special Indiana Jones Epic Stunt Spectacular where at the end when the Cairo Swordsman comes out, instead of the Cairo Swordsman, it was Darth Maul.
Oh,
you have to watch the video because I think George comes out at one point. Pretty spectacular stuff. You'd love it. Pretty amazing.
Oh, I'll have to check that out. Oh, man. Okay. All right, folks. In a moment, Dan and I are going to take a look back at how the original Star Tours came together. More importantly, because we sort of teased this on the last show, Dan and I will talk about the Star Tours ride that we almost got on the heels of Episode 1, The Phantom Menace, back in 1999.
Every leap in American history has needed breakthrough energy.
Ignition, liftoff.
Now, AI is here, and Chevron is working to power it. We're aiming to develop multi-gigawatt power plants near data centers, designed with future pathways to lower carbon intensity. AI gets the power it needs, communities get the jobs, and the grid stays strong. Powering AI today builds America's next superpower.
Breathe deep. Imagine your legs more limber in Duluth Trading Double Flex Denim. Envision euphorically squatting for that can of suds, bending for your toolbox in a state of bliss, lunging for your laser level on a whole new level. Relax and allow the flex to fill you with ability. Find your inner flex in Double Flex Denim only at Duluth Trading.
Okay, we're back, and you just mentioned George Lucas turning up, in the Indiana Jones Epic Stunt Spectacular as part of that last Tour de Endor party, and I got to go chase down that video. That sounds amazing. But I was lucky enough. Over the years, I've been lucky enough to talk with a number of folks who were associated with the original Star Tours: Mark Eads, David Mumford, Bruce Gordon, Tony Baxter, and they talk about, this is the ride that they sort of built while they were waiting on Captain EO to get its crud together. Captain EO was a project that took 2 years. And frankly, ate up a lot of bandwidth at Disney. But while they had George Lucas in the building, and literally this was the thing that George is coming today to talk to us about Captain EO, and we have the simulator technology. And we want to pitch George on the idea of doing something in the the Star Wars universe. In fact, this was seriously, Dan, this was the original pitch. It was tour bus through the universe. In fact, the name for a while of this attraction literally was Starbus, which again we should be happy they let that one go. But the whole notion is, okay, so we're doing fly through adventures that are set in the Star Wars universe, but George is coming in this morning. And so, literally the four Imagineers who were set to work in this project go into a conference room. They each take out an 8x11 piece of paper and quickly do a sketch. And they now have 4 images to show George. And, George comes in, he's there for the Captain EO meeting. And by the way, this is the technology we have, and this is the idea we're doing. And George looks at it and goes, yeah, okay, sure. And that's literally how Star Tours gets underway. But, then it's a question of, okay, well, we got to build a mock-up, which they build out of plywood, but then, pay somebody an awful lot of money to paint to look like metal. But again, it's that creating that Star Wars used future aesthetic. But George was so enthusiastic about this project that, and again, Dan, picture this: the Imagineers get invited up to Skywalker Ranch for a day, and they throw open the archives, and it's like, here, take these back with you to Imagineering, while you put together this attraction. And so they actually end up with one of the original C-3PO costumes. And again, in fact, the interesting thing is that it's one of the Disneyland version of Star Tours. At least for the first couple of years when the attraction was open, when you walked by C-3PO, that was an actual costume that was used in making the original trilogy. They put it on top of, an audio animatronic figure, and in fact, it was kind of interesting when they first showed it to George, because the R2-D2 in the attraction, the original, was also, one that had been used in production. And George just stood there for a moment. It's like, oh my God. It's like when we made the movies, Kenny Baker was always, inside of, the R2-D2. And likewise, Anthony Daniels was inside the suit. This is the first time C-3PO and R2-D2 are actually robots. And that was kind of mind-blowing to George. Now, on the other hand, they brought in Anthony Daniels, and I know you'll love this, day, because Anthony comes and looks at the AA figure, and it's like he's too tall. That he made a point of standing next to the A figure, and sure enough, it's about an inch too tall. It's like, no, you're going to have to make it shorter, and so that the Imagineers, because they really wanted him to be a consultant. They wanted this C-3PO to be as real as possible, or as faithful to his performance as possible. It's okay. And then he says, it's an inch too tall. Let's shorten it.
Yeah, he would know.
Yeah. But the interesting thing is Disney was so determined to make sure that this was as authentic as possible that the C-3PO in the original Disneyland version of Star Tours, as you come around the corner there and there's the Starspeeder 3000 in front of you, he's, he's gold-plated, from the film. So it's okay. We're going to get him gold-plated. $16,000 worth of gold plating, Dan, which,
wow.
If I had known, I would have taken home an entirely different souvenir, But anyway, to get back to, after they pitch it to George, the question is, okay, so it's a flight simulator. We're going to do fly-through adventures of the Star Wars universe. What are we doing? Are we going to recreate that moment from Jedi where, the speeder bike is going through, the redwood forest at Endor, or, again, we can get a really fluid water movement out of this thing. Should we maybe go back to Dagobah and maybe do an underwater adventure through the swamps? And they kept going back and forth on a lot of points. And in fact, for a time, they wanted the pilot not necessarily to be a rookie, but this gun-ho veteran from the Clone Wars, which, again, given what we were just talking about with the Clone Wars animated series and Captain Rex, it's kind of ironic. But yeah, that they initially, the model for this character, who at this point was called Crazy Harry, Dan. The notion was, well, what if he's like one of those Vietnam vets who's now doing helicopter tours in Hawaii? And, you climb on figuring you're going to do this wonderful fly over the island and see greenery, and now you're in the hands of this undependable, unpredictable guy who's prone to dangerous stunts. And eventually the Imagineers realize, well, look, for an attraction, but people, we want them to rewrite it. That the character really has to be more likable than that. So this is when they sort of diverted to Rex and made him a rookie pilot who, the reason he makes mistakes is he's getting nervous. It's his first flight. And so, he sort of bumbles his way through the attraction, the adventure we're having an attraction, but in the end, proves himself to be heroic. And have you ever heard who they first went to for the voice of Rex, though?
No, I haven't.
Okay. The Journey into Imagination track, right?
Yeah.
And these days, if you go on the ride, Figment is voiced by Dave Goelz. He's the voice of Gonzo from the Muppets. But the original voice of Figment was done by Billy Barty, who folks probably know, a very famous little person. Used to do a lot of work for Sid and Marty Krofft. In fact, he was the one who was zippered inside of the Sigmund the Sea Monster costume, and ran around in that outfit. But so they bring Billy in, to do the voice because he'd done Figment, and it's like we enjoyed working with him. But at this point, Billy's in his 70s, and they put him behind the mic, and he doesn't sound like a rookie robot. He sounds like a salty old sea captain. And it's like, and it's like we
buckle up, matey.
And that's the thing. It's just sort of like, we love working with guys, but he's the wrong voice. Where I want to say it was Bruce Gordon who had gone into LA to see the Groundlings. and came back just raving about this guy he'd seen during the show who was doing this weird character who was supposed to be a kid show host, Pee Wee Herman. And, but the interesting thing is Imagineering hires Paul Reubens to come do the voice of Rex before Pee Wee really starts to break. It's before the Pee Wee movie. It's before the Pee Wee TV show. But and just a kind of a lucky coincidence, by the time the attraction opens in January of '87, Reubens is everywhere. So it's like, we're smart. Now, had you ever heard the actual backstory, the very first backstory that Disney put out for Star Tours?
No, I didn't.
Oh, okay. I swear to God, folks, this is how. If you got online in 1987, you quizzed a cast member about what is this, and say, oh, well, if you saw Return of the Jedi, you know that the Rebel Alliance has finally triumphed over the evil Empire, and the Star Wars, for now, are over for the most part. Rumors persist that there may be another Death Star out there orbiting somewhere off in the galaxy, but the rebels, they want to rebuild their world in peace, and they've decided that an influx of adventurous tourists or potential homesteaders would be just the thing they need to revitalize their part of the galaxy. And what better way to bring in tourists than to offer them pleasure tours of the former Rebel and Empire bases? And what better place to find tourists than at Disneyland? And another weird little side note here, Dan. In the early scripts and storyboards for Star Tours, the Star Speeders actually took off from Disneyland. They'd fly out by sort of banking by the Matterhorn, and you'd zoom over the castle, and only then would you start to head up and disappear into the clouds. And what's interesting is that if you're a fan of old Disneyland, this is a throwback to the Flight to the Moon ride from the park, opening day attraction from '55. But the interesting thing is, I think it was Michael Eisner himself who pointed out that, well, wait a minute. If we start the ride film off with scenes from Disneyland, this means this version of the show can't be used at other Disney theme parks in the years to come. And Eisner really wanted to franchise this one as quickly as possible. So it was like, okay. From that point forward, the Star Speeders would then blast off from an orbiting station, which I'm almost embarrassed to admit I didn't put together, Dan, till today. It was like, oh, yeah, they're out in space. That's okay.
I forgive you.
All right. Anyway, according to Mark Eads, the original plan for Star Tours was every 3 years they'd create a new ride film. And with the idea that, 10 years in, they'd then have, they had 4 different simulators, Starpitters 3000 at Disneyland. And the idea was that 10 years in, every single one of the Star Speeders at Disneyland would be going to a different destination. And the 4 that had supposedly been picked were, of course, Endor. Then we've seen the posters from that version of the attraction, Hoth, Tatooine, and Dagobah. But, according to Mark, because the line never died for the ride, there was just no need for a new ride film. Now, again, on our last looking at Lucasfilm, Dan and I teased why it took so long to get a new ride film. In fact, we didn't get Star Tours: The Adventures Continue at Disneyland until May of 2011, and it wasn't until June of that same year the Disney Hollywood Studios got its version. And by the way, in fact, I think it's Brian J. Jones's book that bears this story out, but it was at the opening of the Disney Hollywood Studios version of Star Tours: The Adventures Continue. In fact, it was George and Bob Iger had gone to breakfast before the big grand opening media event in the center of the park, and they were at that recreation of the Brown Derby. And it was over that breakfast that Iger basically initially sort of pitched the idea that if George were ever going to sell Lucasfilm, and particularly the Star Wars characters and that sort of thing, that he'd love to make a home for them at Disney. And George, didn't necessarily say no. And he basically said, let me think about it. And a year or so later, we know what happened. But that said, we could have gotten a new ride film for Star Tours 12 years earlier. In fact, as I've been told the story, it starts in 1998. George's storyboard team is putting together the pod race scene for Phantom Menace. And, as the animatics come in, George looks at it and it's just sort of like, wow, this looks so much better than I thought I would. And in fact, this is, good that we're taking the audience on quite a ride here. And that sort of makes him think, and he calls down to Walt Disney Imagineering and gets a hold of Tom Fitzgerald, who had been the show producer of the original Star Tours, and said, hey, can you come up to Skywalker Ranch sometime next week? And so Tom goes up. George, runs the work in progress effects footage for the pod race sequence from Phantom Menace. He takes him down the hall and shows him, the models of the other racers, the storyboard art, concept art, and it's like, wouldn't this be a really cool update of Star Tours? And Tom agrees, and takes a selected amount of material back with him to Imagineering headquarters in Glendale, California, and they work up a concept for a new Star Tours ride film. And this is basically how that new ride experience was supposed to have gone. So we enter the Star Tours terminal building, and as we make the turn and start to walk past the Star Speeder 3000, the giant video screen makes us aware that we are, no longer today, we are not going to Endor. Our new destination is the Lunar Olympics, which are being held in Yavin. Now the Star Speeders themselves look exactly like, the ride vehicles we've been on previously, but these, if you go behind the scenes, significantly update. The old the flight simulators have been swapped out for the latest models. These would feature video flat screens, high def, brand new audio, and some pretty spectacular in-flight effects, which we'll get to in a minute. But anyway, you climb into your Star Speeder, you're seated, the screen comes down. Rex is no longer at the helm. Our pilot is a more seasoned veteran. In fact, this is really kind of, Crazy Harry, 2.0 Dan. And what's kind of funny and kind of a nod to the original version of the ride is that as you're, headed toward your departure point from this orbiting station, the Star Speeder in 3000 in front of you makes a hard left, makes that familiar wrong turn from the first version of the ride, and your pilot sort of turns his head and must be one of them new droids from Sector 7. Anyway, we remain on course. We launch out of the portal like we were always supposed to, but we now find ourselves in formation. This large group of Star Speeders that are waiting to be cleared to jump to light speed, and it just sort of, we're told that it's going to be another 20 minutes, and it's just our pilot again turns around, and it's just like, wait a minute, I know a shortcut. And he veers off to the side, but, when he comes out of the jump to light speed, he doesn't recognize anything around him. So he decides to take us down to the nearest planet to ask for directions from some locals. But, when he lands, we're in that stadium at Tatooine, where Jabba's presiding over the pod race. And yet as he chugs into line, a bunch of pit droids come over, and he literally rolls down the window and is talking with the pit droids. But what he's not noticing as he's talking with the pit droids is the pit droids to either side of the vehicle are outfitting us with racing pods, because it's like, well, you're in line here at the pod race, you must be about to compete. And then suddenly, we get pushed to the front of the starting line, and before our pilot realizes what's going on, the pod race engines have kicked on, and we're in the middle of the race. We are zooming along, and not only that, we have unfortunately caught the attention of Sebulba, the villainous pod racer from Phantom Menace, who now is trying to, get us out of the competition. So he's pulling all sorts of maneuvers. At one point, he tosses a bomb back at our star speeder, which causes the windshield to blow out. And remember, in this version, we're supposedly wearing racing goggles, 3D glasses. So we see all this glass seemingly fly into the car, and then he gets right in front of us and kicks on his afterburners. And when I talked about the in-flight effects, one of the things you were going to feel was this sudden surge of heat because Sebulba's pod racer is in the windshield, seemingly blowing flame into our car. Now, this fire effect takes out one of our pod race engines, and we begin to free fall. But as we do so, we smack into Sebulba's pod racer and send him off a cliff. And we make it back to the stadium where we started. We only do one lap, not if folks remember the Phantom Menace, Annie winds up doing 3 laps, right, Dan? That's how he wins the race.
Yeah, it is 3. It's 3.
Yeah. But yes, we seemingly slide sideways into the stands, and that's what was really going to be intriguing about this version of Star Tours, was that to really up the game and that sort of thing. As the screen is going down, we see we're in the stands, and we see some pretty angry fans because we've of course come up and unseated them and that sort of thing. But as the doors open and we go to the exit, there are 4 different animatronic race fans who are now basically heckling us, like, "Hey, you ruined my time, and you made me spill my drink," and we walk by them down to the standard Star Traders show experience, and of course by our brand new Star Tours Pod Racing Edition souvenirs, and. But the interesting thing is, during the time that it took to get this sort of all sussed out and boarded and taken up to George, George had gone back to Walt Disney World with his family for a vacation. And it's interesting that you brought up the Indiana Jones Epic Stunt Spectacular, because George took his family to watch the show and was very dismayed to see that a number of the key effects for the show just weren't working. And it was like, Disney had made a promise to him when they initially created the show that, that, they were going to keep it up, and it was always going to be in great working condition. And George went home kind of miffed that Disney didn't seem to be holding up their end of the deal. And so when the Imagineers went up to, talk with George about, okay, so, ILM made the last ride film. Can you guys make the new ride film? And it's like, maybe we want to hold off on doing this for a while. And, and George's instincts were actually pretty much on the money, because it wasn't a year or two later then suddenly Roy Disney launched the whole Save Disney movement, and with the idea that he wanted to replace, force Michael Eisner out as the chairman and CEO of the Walt Disney Company, because Roy pretty much felt the same thing, that Michael wasn't keeping up his end of the deal. And there was that fairly brutal shareholders meeting in Philadelphia in the spring of 2004, where Michael was basically forced to give up his chairmanship, and it wasn't, 15 months later that he effectively, left the company. He stepped down as chairman in, September of 2005, and Bob Iger, then, came on as the new head of the Mouse House, and one of the very first things he did was repair, the company's relationship with George Lucas, which is how we eventually wound up with Star Wars, The Adventures Continue. But by then, George had a bigger, grander idea that why go to one new destination when we can go to dozens? But we'll talk about that version of the attraction on another Looking at Lucasfilm.
Dun, dun, dun.
Now, I have to ask Dan, are you still doing the daily version of Coffee with Kenobi? Because
we had excellent response and downloads, and people seem to like it. But I just kind of thought, I'm giving people homework. I listened through the shows just from an editing perspective, and I thought this is just a lot. When people have a lot of things going on, they're readjusting kind of to a new kind of a normal, at least for a while. And I thought I don't want to give people more homework. I want to give them an escape. So what I've done is we're just doing a show a week, and as bonus shows come up, I just put them out, and that's kind of happened. But to kind of supplant that and give it a little bit more something for people to do, but have a sort of a different thing, where every Monday night, for 3 weeks now, I've done Facebook Live, a Coffee with Kenobi Facebook Live at 8 o'clock p.m. Central Time. And every week we get more and more people. I've invested financially in sort of the production value on it, and it's been an absolute blast.
Wow. Okay. Well, and I say this as a guy who's doing 6 different podcasts. That sounds like a lot of work.
It actually is. I took a long time to kind of figure and fine tune some of this stuff. Always work in progress, but again, I like to kind of push the envelope.
Okay. Well, in addition to the Facebook thing and the standard Coffee with Kenobi, where else can folks find you online?
Sure. Well, you can find me personally on Twitter at Mr. Zehr, MRZEHR, and some of you already do that. So I love chatting and interacting with everybody. You can find Coffee with Kenobi all over social media: Facebook, Pinterest, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube. Again, Coffee with Kenobi is on all kinds of podcatchers, and StarWars.com. I've been a little bit more busy, and occasionally you'll see me on IGN as well.
Oh, that is so cool. And as I mentioned, the 6 different podcasts we do here. So we got Disney Dish I do with Len Testa. We got Marvelous Disney podcast that I do with Aaron Adams. It's about all the Marvel Entertainment related things that Disney's up to these days. We just talked about Drew Taylor a little bit ago, and that's the gentleman I do the fine tuning podcast with. Which, yes, again, he's written that wonderful The Art of Onward book.
Yes, a great book. And Drew, of course, is a gentleman and a scholar. I think he's often referred to that in social circles.
You and I travel in different social circles. Okay. And we also have the Universal Joint podcast that I do with Dustin Hughes. Likewise, we have the I Want That podcast that I do with Michelle Valladolid, which is about Disney merch. And, of course, the podcast you're listening to right now, Looking at Lucasfilm. Tell you what, folks, if you could do Dan and I a favor, and if you could head over to iTunes and not only recommend this show, but also recommend Coffee with Kenobi, that is very helpful when it comes to attracting additional listeners and additional eyeballs. By the way, though, if you really, really, really like what you're listening to right now, if you head over to Bandcamp and subscribe to the Jim Hill Media Podcast Network, that would be very helpful. Likewise, Dan mentioned social media a moment ago. You can find us on Twitter and Instagram as Jim Hill Media, and over at Facebook as Jim Hill Media News. I have no idea why. But I guess that for now will do it, Dan. And again, folks, look, again, everybody's dealing with the same stuff right now. We're all in our houses, and that's why, again, we're hopefully, Dan and I provide you with little entertainment, a distraction here, and we will try to stay in your corner in the weeks and months ahead. So, but like I said, if you could help us out here, if anybody got, for example, that Target exclusive of The Rise of Skywalker, if you want to weigh in about whether it's worth it to get it for that gallery book and that, what is it, that 4K Ultra HD a version of the, we'd love to hear back from you. But for now, I guess that'll do it, Dan.
All right, sounds good. Hey, may the force be with you, everybody. Stay healthy and safe.